Welcome to this Ignite video. Today Emma will show you the process for completing international residential event notification forms.
My name's Emma. I'm a Brownie leader in Aberdeen and I've travelled internationally with both Brownies and guides, and I'm here to talk you through how you complete one of these. It's an international REN form. Some important points of housekeeping first. You can't travel internationally with your unit until you have done your going away with qualification at home, so on a Brownie pack holiday, a guide camp, something like that. Also really important to note that rainbows are the only section that cannot travel internationally. That's because of the amount of time you're allowed to be away with a rainbow unit. But Brownies, guides and rangers can all travel internationally. It's also really important to understand that current Girl Guiding UK policy is that international RENs can only be approved at country or region level. So for us, that's the Scottish Chief Commissioner and the Scottish International Advisor. Now, your county team can still give you lots of helpful advice and support, but they cannot be the ones to approve your REN. So it's really important to remember that. It's also really important to know that for your home going away with, you've got to have all the relevant section qualifications. So if you were going to take a mixed group of Brownies and guides, you need to have your going away with Brownie and guide section modules completed already. If all that's in place and you're ready to take the next step and travel internationally with your unit, let's get into what needs to happen. So this form is a little bit different from the going away with form that you would complete for a home trip. It comes in 3 sections. Permission to plan, part 1, part 2. Permission to plan should ideally be submitted 9 to 18 months before you're planning to travel. That's because there's a lot more organisation work involved in travelling internationally. You need to give yourself enough time to do it all. So permission to plan is the first 4 parts of the form. Really all that is a rough idea of where you're planning to go, when you're planning to go, what adult members you're planning to take, and a number of what young members you're planning to take. Once you've got all that down, you submit it, and you can either send it in directly to scotlandintops@gmail.com, or you can ask your county international advisor to submit it on your behalf. What happens at that point is there are what we call go checks. This means we look at the qualifications listed for all the adult members to ensure that everybody's got everything they need. So that could be the home going away with for the overall leader of the trip. That's your safe space, your first response, checking that everybody's had their PVG checks, etc., etc. If all of that comes back fine, then you are good to go and start planning. And that's where the fun bit really happens. Ideally, you then need to be submitting part 1 about 9 months before you travel. Part 1 of the form means that you are double checking sections 1 to 4, making sure that it's still accurate. Have you had any changes in your leadership team? Are you taking a different number of girls? And then you're also confirming your insurance policy, your accommodation, and crucially, your risk assessment. Now, it's really important to say you must have your insurance in place before you do anything else. Don't book accommodation or book travel until you've arranged your insurance policy. That just means that you are covered if something should go wrong. We don't have time to get into the full details of a risk assessment here. That really is the subject of a separate video. But what will happen when you submit part 1 is that the international team will take a look at your risk assessment. They'll read it through, they'll offer you some advice, they'll maybe suggest other things that need to be documented. The real point of a risk assessment is it's not a pass-fail exercise. It's about you working through every stage of your trip, thinking about what could go wrong and what measures you need to put in place to stop that from happening. If all of that is fine, if you've incorporated any feedback on your risk assessment, updated it if you need to, you'll get the form returned with part 1 signed. Now, 4 months before you're due to travel, you need to submit an updated risk assessment and an itinerary for your trip. There isn't a detailed section on the form to sign this off, but it's still really good practice to do this. By that time, you should know exactly where you're going, what you'll be doing. You maybe have made some tweaks to the risk assessment. It's just an opportunity for another check to make sure that everything is in process. Finally, there's part 2. That again is your opportunity to do a check of all of the form, make sure all the details are correct, and get your home contact information in. Now, part 2 should be submitted no later than 4 weeks before you're due to travel. So it really is the final check. That will again be reviewed, everything checked off to make sure everything still tallies, all the qualifications are still in date. That will then be signed and returned to you. At that point, it's bon voyage, have a wonderful trip, and I hope everybody really enjoys themselves. Now, this form is pretty bulky. It runs to a number of pages, but I want to draw everyone's attention to this back page. There are a heap of really useful resources here. Everything from the activity finder to a risk assessment template to links to all of the forms that you're going to need to go and travel internationally. They've done the hard work for you. Really use that resource and make sure that you are checking everything off and using all the information that's available. And like this form, everything's there on the Girl Guiding website, ready for you to access at any time. Now, this is the paper form, obviously. It's also possible to submit an international REN via Go. The process is basically essentially the same. You will fill in the same details. It'll be done through the same timeline. But the important thing to remember is the way Go works is it will default to your most senior, the nearest most senior commissioner to you. So the international team will need to go in, check, pick it up and assign themselves as the people who have to sign off that form. Otherwise, the process is pretty much exactly the same. You do need to send in a risk assessment still separately. There's not an ability on Go to append a risk assessment to your form. So you'd still be emailing that into the scotlandintops@gmail.com address. But otherwise, the process is pretty much exactly the same. You just don't get a physical signed copy of a form returned to you. Hope that's been helpful. If you'd like more information on travelling internationally or some of the other bits and pieces that you need to do, let us know. Your feedback's always really welcome. And if you've ever just got any questions, if you're not sure where to start, perhaps you don't have an international advisor in your county, please do get in touch. Again, that email address is scotlandintops@gmail.com. We're always happy to help, and there is no such thing as a stupid question.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed it. We would love to hear your thoughts, so please fill in the feedback form on the Ignite Hub webpage.